Well, it's been good to get a little bit of a feel for who Justin Vanderscaff is. You excited to get into what happened last week, or really would you like to avoid that topic at all costs?
I really, don't want to talk about it. It was the most miserable game I've ever seen out of my team in the history of the time I've played fantasy football. It was just absolutely terrible. Everybody either got injured or just completely laid an egg, with the exception of Tony Romo, who still didn't have a great game, but he at least played decently. I really thought that Kevin Walter was going to be a big pickup for me this week, and I know that you texted me midweek after the pickup about how upset you were that I got him over you.
I wanted him, yeah, I definitely.
Ultimately, he scored 2.5 points, despite the fact that his team scored 41.
Yeah,
He didn't get enough yardage. He didn't get enough catches. He didn't get any touchdowns.
so we both knew that the team was going to have a good week.
Oh yeah, but it went to all the wrong people for me. Dwayne Bowe had a lot of catches and a lot of yards, but he didn't get into the end zone. And our league is still very focused on touchdowns.
Oh yeah, I think next year when we get the 1.1 point per reception rather than a half a point, that's going to really mix things up.
I'll
But
definitely be drafting wide receivers higher than running backs next year.
yeah, the moral of last week really was that Jesse is a real force to be reckoned with right now. I mean, top to bottom, he's got players that are all very capable of very uh, scary weeks. So
Mm-hmm.
um, this the 132 points. I mean, you'd like to say it's kind of a fluke or something like that, but I don't really see how you can.
Well, part of it does come from New Orleans' absolute drubbing of Indianapolis.
It helps, yeah. I mean,
That's the biggest win in the NFL since the merger. So
yeah, and it resulted in 40 points out of his wide receivers. So the bottom line is, though, that it's not good for the rest of the league to see Jesse doing that well.
we'll see if it's a 1 week thing or if it's going to continue on
Yeah.
through the rest of the season.
No, definitely, it was a rough game for you. I mean, the silver lining here, if you're going to have a crappy game, this is the week to have it.
Yeah,
It's
Jesse had one of the higher scores I've ever seen in the league this week since
Yeah.
we went to this lineup setup.
It's the second highest score of the season for any team this year. You didn't really lose a ton of ground, I guess. It doesn't really hurt you in in the playoff picture.
No,
It would have
really.
been it was a great opportunity, with the other two
Absolutely.
teams
If I could
losing.
have beaten him this week, I would have been tied on top of the division.
But the bottom line is you're not out of anything by any stretch of the imagination. It's just a lot tougher for you with the depletion of all of your, especially your running back core.
Yep.
You just chalk this one up, I think. Um,
Definitely my original draft planning at the beginning of the season, I had planned it out so I was going to be rotating buys through most of the season, and then just because of the way injuries piled up on my team, I ended up doing a lot of pickups, and I ended up last week having, what was it, 6 or 7 players on
Yeah.
buy before the trade, and that obviously hurt me last week too. So
yeah, and that, um, yeah. So, in the next pretty crappy game that uh, happened last week, Devin, as expected, just made short work of Hedgie. There's really nothing exciting about this game. Without Eli Manning, Hedgie's team really falls apart. More concerning for Hedgie than anything, I think, should be the real downward trend that Larry Fitzgerald has been taking.
oh yeah.
He spent the first overall pick in the draft on him, and his last 2 weeks he has scored under 10 points cumulatively. So
Yeah, what you're seeing, the problem there is the fact that Arizona is just flat out not a good team.
no, and especially with Beanie Wells' injury problems,
Mhm.
that allows defenses to just completely key in on Fitz, and it's a real problem. I mean, the week that Devin scores -1 out of his quarterback is the week that you're supposed to get to him, but
Speaking of, how do you win 28 to nothing and score -1 points as a quarterback?
Your defense scores 14.
That's true. I mean, I would have killed to have the Chiefs D last week
Yeah.
because, let's face it, Oakland was just miserable after the injury, and they're trying to start, Palmer, despite the fact that he's only had a few snaps in practice, hasn't had time to learn more than a page or two of the playbook.
I really think the only reason Palmer even saw playing time was because they threw in the towel at halftime, and they're like,
Oh,
this is
absolutely.
just a half of live action practice for you. We've already lost the game. There's no pressure.
I mean, it sure doesn't look good for Palmer, though, throwing 3 picks, but...
Yeah, I don't think it's that big of a deal, personally.
No, but...
I mean, he said himself, I only know about 10% of this offense. Really the important thing out of this game between Devin and Hedgie is just that Hedgie is becoming perilously close to being statistically eliminated from the playoffs already, and Devin really was able to keep pace and stay and get into that three-way log jam that I predicted. On my game with BG, the entire red division breathed a sigh of relief to see BG slow down at least a little bit. I mean, I guess, Aaron Rodgers, 3 touchdowns, 300 plus yards. How's BG supposed to win if he's putting up things, performances like that? So,
I mean, ultimately, the problem that BG is running into here is that his team is the Aaron Rodgers show.
yep.
He cannot get a consistent performance out of any other position on his team. You look at this week, he scored 1.5 points out of his 2 running backs, and Anquan Bolden was his only other player to score more than 10 points.
Well, BG has, between both of his running backs, 2 of his wide receivers, and his kicker, he managed a total of 5.5 points. When you're getting 5.5 points out of 5 roster spots combined, that's a real issue. Aaron Rodgers is not going to throw 6 touchdowns a game. So, you got to find a way to win when he's only going to be throwing 3 touchdowns a game.
Absolutely.
It was good to see a strong performance out of at least a few parts of my team. I didn't really have a great week by any stretch of the imagination, but it was just enough to win. Hopefully, getting a couple of these bad weeks by Ray Rice out of the way now, he'll be able to pick it up, and really my team will hopefully be able to string together multiple wins in a row now. Jared, you could have made me look good, man. I went on a limb, had your back, and you just couldn't quite pull it out. I know Joe Flacco really hurt you, but
I mean, 36.5 points out of Arian Foster, and he still lost.
yeah.
Obviously, Willis McGahee really hurt him being injured and whatnot, and that obviously the Titans defense was the wrong pick this week. Anybody but the Titans defense, I don't care who. I mean, maybe the worst pick would be Indianapolis.
No,
but
they would have been better.
Did they score a turnover this week or
I
a
think
sack?
they did. Yeah, I mean,
no
Indianapolis
sacks,
defense.
no turnovers, no nothing. Look into getting a different defense. I guess is what I'm getting at.
Really, the bottom line is, with this loss, it's pretty much official. It is now a 4-team race for the 3 playoff spots in the red. That's the bottom line at this point. We'll see if Jared begins to throw in the towel and not update anything, or if he tries to revel in the opportunity to play spoiler. The aforementioned miserable, I mean, really it wasn't.
It wasn't as bad as it could have been.
No, and I think the bottom line coming out of this game is what I had thought before. If Matt Stafford and Javid Best don't perform,
Kevin is sunk.
yeah, Kevin's in a lot of trouble. It doesn't help him that Vincent Jackson didn't really do anything, and Jordy Nelson is either going to have a giant play that gets him into the double digits, or he's going to just not show up. So this
Yeah,
is
that's the problem with him. He, unlike Jennings, he is not a consistent threat.
absolutely not. It's going to be interesting to see whether Kevin decides to take a chance on um, Stafford this week, but we'll get into that, I guess, a little bit
I
later.
certainly wouldn't. I mean,
Yeah.
I would absolutely be starting Matt Schaub this week over Stafford.
Not terribly much to report around the DFL this week. No,
No big trades.
not
Obviously,
really.
we have not seen what's going to be coming on the waiver wire yet because that will roll over at about 2 o'clock this morning.
Yeah, but not very much as far as things to report around the DFL. It is interesting. Um, let's see how many 6 out of the 10 people replied to the poll on the site this week, and overwhelmingly everybody agrees that BG's trade for Rodgers is pretty much the biggest trade that the league, well, is the biggest trade of the season so far. And I would imagine, I mean, I don't have good enough historical documentation of the major trades of all DFL history, but I would imagine this would probably right up there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we're losing out on by eliminating the franchise tag is that we'll no longer see blockbuster trades like that prior to the draft because what are you going to do? Trade your draft pick for someone else's draft pick? Trade someone a draft pick this year for a future draft pick?
Well, I actually had an idea about that I'll throw out there right now. We can kind of talk about this. Um, so I like that we have um, the 2 minute draft clock. Well, 1 minute for the first 5 rounds, but I think um, that it would be a good idea to implement to say you have a 1 minute draft clock unless someone offers you a trade, in which case it's bumped up to 10 minutes. I think if you allow people extra time, because say whoever gets that first pick overall, somebody else might be able to offer them a really good package for that pick, should they so
Mm-hmm.
choose. And I think that the mid draft trading is a really fun element to our league that is worth expanding on. What do you think about that kind of an
Oh,
idea?
I absolutely like the mid-draft trading, and I gotta say, if I were to end up with the first overall pick next year, and someone offered me another first-round pick and another later pick in the third round or something, I would probably jump at it.
Yeah, so I mean,
Especially since when you consider the fact that the players that are going in the first round in our drafts for the past, however, what is it, 13 years that the DFL has been going on now, without the franchise tag, the first round in our past drafts is basically the first and second rounds
yeah.
in the new draft.
So
Just because we've got more players in the mix and we don't have the 10 players every season that are totally locked up.
So I'm going to be adding that to our running thread, but something to think about. Maybe if anybody else has any ideas, um, I'd like to throw that out there on the table as an option for to preserve that mid-draft trading and maybe even expand on it. That we have that strict draft clock unless you are in the middle of trade negotiations, and then it would increase by some certain amount. Not terribly much to report on around the NFL either. There was some really interesting plays on the field. I liked the storyline that's developing about Ndamukong Suh
Oh yeah,
um,
absolutely.
mocking Matt Ryan.
Did not make the Lions look good last
No.
week, especially when they lost the game.
No, it just came out today that I can't remember what his name is, but some schlub on the Vikings got fined 50 G's for kicking TJ Lang in the nuts. Did you see that play?
I did not actually watch the play, but I did hear about it.
Yeah, it's pretty wicked. One interesting storyline around the NFL is that Terrell Owens held his own personal workout and nobody showed up. So I think that's pretty funny.
I do find that funny, and I also find it kind of surprising because as much of a drama queen as he is, and even though he's getting older, he'd still be a good receiver on most teams in the league.
I think teams know what they're getting with
Exactly.
Terrell Owens. I think it's completely a media stunt anyway, just to get his name back out there. Terrell Owens is a known commodity. You know what he has. You've got 15 seasons
Absolutely.
to look at him.